The black SUVs arrived at Bella Vista restaurant like a storm front rolling in from the Pacific. 12 vehicles parking with military precision along Ocean View's main strip, as Vincent Marconi watched from behind his hostess station with growing dread. 24 hours earlier, he'd made what seemed like a simple business decision, ejecting a disabled man whose prosthetic leg and 1,000-yard stare didn't match the upscale image he wanted for his Italian restaurant. The man had left quietly, without argument, just a nod and a walk to the door. But as 12 of the most dangerous-looking individuals Vinny had ever seen emerged from those SUVs and formed up outside his establishment, he realized that the quiet veteran he'd dismissed wasn't just any former soldier. He was Marcus Bradley, a decorated Navy SEAL who'd lost his leg in Afghanistan and apparently hadn't lost his brothers. They'd come to Ocean View to deliver a simple message about respect, honor, and what happens when you mess with one of their own, and they were about to turn Vinny's comfortable world upside down in ways he never imagined possible. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Vincent Marconi's hands trembled as he gripped the leather-bound reservation book, his knuckles white against the dark cover. The lunch rush at Bella Vista had been proceeding normally until those vehicles began appearing one by one along Pacific Coast Highway. Each SUV was identical, black, spotless, with tinted windows that revealed nothing of their occupants. They'd arrived in sequence, parking with the kind of precision that spoke of military training and coordinated planning. "Angela," Vincent called toward the kitchen, his voice catching slightly. "You need to come see this." His wife emerged from behind the service counter, wiping her hands on her apron. Angela Marconi had been managing the front of house operations for 12 years, long enough to recognize when something was seriously wrong. She followed her husband's gaze through the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the street. "What am I looking at?" she asked, though her tone suggested she was beginning to understand. "Count them," Vincent whispered. 12 vehicles, all identical, all parked like they're setting up a perimeter. The restaurant's dining room buzzed with its usual Tuesday afternoon energy. Business executives shared power lunches at corner tables, while elderly couples enjoyed the early bird specials. The soft murmur of conversation mixed with the gentle clinking of silverware against china, creating the ambient soundtrack Vincent had worked years to perfect. But that familiar rhythm was beginning to falter as other patrons noticed the unusual activity outside. Dr. Richard Hoffman paused mid-conversation with his wife Susan, his fork hovering over his chicken parmigiana as he turned toward the windows. At a nearby table, Harold Brennan, a Korean War veteran who'd been a regular for nearly a decade, set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. His weathered face had gone pale as he observed the vehicles and their occupants. "Vinny," Harold called, quietly, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "Those aren't tourists." The first man emerged from the lead SUV with fluid, economical movements. Tall and lean, wearing jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, he could have been mistaken for any other California resident, if not for his bearing. There was something about the way he held himself, the way his eyes swept the area with professional assessment that marked him as unmistakably military. His sandy hair was cut short, and his face bore the kind of weathered calm that came from years of high-stakes situations. "That's their leader," Angela observed, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Look how the others defer to him." One by one, the remaining vehicles disgorged their passengers. Each man shared the same general characteristics: fit, alert, moving with the quiet confidence of professional warriors. They wore civilian clothes, but their posture and coordination screamed military training. As they assembled on the sidewalk, they naturally formed a loose formation that blocked any casual access to the restaurant's entrance. Vincent's mind raced back to the previous evening, trying to reconstruct every detail of his encounter with the disabled veteran. The man had arrived alone, walking with the careful gait of someone adjusting to a prosthetic limb. He'd been quiet, polite even, when he'd requested a table for one. But something about him had unsettled Vincent. Perhaps the way his eyes constantly scanned the room, or the haunted quality that seemed to follow him like a shadow. "Sir, I think you'd be more comfortable somewhere else," Vincent had said, approaching the man's table after he'd been seated for only 10 minutes. "We cater to a specific clientele here, and I'm not sure this is the right fit." The veteran had looked up at him with those penetrating grey eyes, a flicker of understanding and disappointment crossing his features. "I see," he'd replied simply. Of course, there had been no argument, no scene. The man had simply stood, left a $20 bill on the table for the water and bread he'd barely touched, and walked out. Vincent had felt a momentary pang of guilt, but he'd quickly suppressed it. Business was business, and he had an image to maintain. Now, watching the assembled group outside his restaurant, that guilt was transforming into something much more visceral. Fear. "Should we call the police?" Angela asked, her voice barely audible. Before Vincent could respond, the leader of the group, a man who carried himself with unmistakable command presence, began walking toward the restaurant's entrance. His movements were unhurried but purposeful, and Vincent noticed that the other men maintained their positions, creating what could only be described as a security perimeter. The lunch crowd had definitely taken notice now. Conversations grew quieter as diners strained to see what was happening outside. Jennifer Palmer, a local real estate agent, had her phone out and was discreetly recording the scene. Mark Garrett instinctively moved closer to his wife Lisa and their 8-year-old daughter Emma, his protective instincts triggered by the obvious tension. "Maybe they're just passing through," Angela suggested weakly, but her words lacked conviction. Vincent knew better. The precision of their arrival, the coordinated positioning, the way they'd focused exclusively on his establishment. This was deliberate. This was planned. And at the center of it all was his decision the night before to turn away a man who'd apparently been much more than he'd appeared. The leader reached the entrance and paused, his hand resting on the brass door handle. Through the glass, Vincent could see him clearly for the first time. The man was perhaps 40, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into foreign suns and hostile territories. His face was calm, almost relaxed. But there was something in his expression that made Vincent's stomach clench with apprehension. "He's coming in," Angela breathed. The door opened with its familiar chime, a sound that had always been welcoming, but now seemed ominous. The man stepped inside, and Vincent noticed how his presence seemed to fill the space despite his average height. Other diners looked up from their meals, sensing the shift in atmosphere, even if they couldn't identify its source. The newcomer's eyes swept the dining room with professional thoroughness before settling on Vincent. When their gazes met, Vincent felt as though he was being evaluated by someone who'd spent years making life and death assessments of people and situations. "Mr. Marconi," the man said, his voice calm and measured. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Vincent managed, his throat suddenly dry. "That's me. I'm Senior Chief Coleman. We need to talk." The way he said it left no room for negotiation. This wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact. Vincent glanced toward Angela, who was standing frozen behind the hostess station, then back at the man who just introduced himself with military rank rather than a civilian title. "Talk about what?" Vincent asked, though he suspected he already knew. Senior Chief Coleman's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. "About Marcus Bradley, about respect, about the conversation you and are going to have right now." The name hit Vincent like a physical blow. Marcus Bradley, the veteran he'd dismissed so casually the night before, the man whose quiet dignity he'd mistaken for weakness. The soldier whose brothers had apparently decided that his treatment warranted a personal response. Outside, the 11 other men maintained their positions with military discipline. They weren't threatening anyone, weren't blocking traffic, or causing a disturbance, but their presence was unmistakable, a silent statement that commanded attention and respect from everyone who passed by. Local police cruiser had already driven past twice, the officers inside clearly noting the unusual gathering, but apparently seeing no immediate cause for intervention. "I think," Senior Chief Coleman continued, his voice remaining perfectly level, "we should discuss this privately. Your office would be appropriate. It wasn't a suggestion, and Vincent knew it. Whatever was about to happen, whatever conversation was about to take place, it would reshape his understanding of the man he'd turned away and the consequences of his actions." The brothers had come to Ocean View, and Vincent Marconi was about to learn exactly what that meant. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Vincent led Senior Chief Coleman through the dining room toward his office, acutely aware of the eyes following their progress. The quiet authority radiating from the SEAL made every step feel like a march to judgment. Behind them, Angela attempted to maintain normalcy, checking on tables and refilling water glasses, but her movements were stiff with tension. "Right this way," Vincent managed, his voice artificially bright for the benefit of his customers. Coleman's office occupied a cramped space behind the kitchen, barely large enough for a desk, 2 chairs, and filing cabinets stuffed with vendor contracts and employee records. Vincent had always felt comfortable in this space, his domain, his control. Now, as Coleman settled into the worn visitor's chair, with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to adapting to any environment, the office felt impossibly small. "Tell me about last night," Coleman said without preamble. Vincent's palms were sweating as he fumbled with papers on his desk, a nervous habit that provided no actual purpose. "Look, if this is about the gentleman who was here yesterday evening, I think there might be some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." Coleman's voice remained level, but there was steel beneath the calm surface. "Marcus Bradley entered your establishment. You asked him to leave. I want to know why." The directness of the question caught Vincent off guard. He'd expected accusations, threats, perhaps even legal terminology. Instead, he faced a simple request for information delivered with the kind of quiet intensity that suggested evasion would be unwise. "It's a business decision," Vincent began, then paused as Coleman's gray eyes fixed on him with uncomfortable precision. "We maintain certain standards here, a certain atmosphere. Sometimes a customer doesn't fit the image we're trying to project." "What image is that?" Vincent shifted in his chair, searching for words that wouldn't sound as prejudiced as his actual thoughts had been. "Upscale, professional. Our clientele expects a certain level of sophistication, and Marcus didn't meet that standard." The question hung in the air between them. Vincent realized he was being led through his reasoning step by step, forced to examine the logic behind his decision. It was, he suspected, an interrogation technique honed through years of military experience. He seemed troubled, the way he looked around the room constantly, the prosthetic leg. Some of our customers noticed and appeared uncomfortable. Coleman leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped in front of him. "Which customers?" "What?" "You said customers appeared uncomfortable. Which ones? What did they say?" Vincent's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The truth was that no customer had complained. No one had said anything at all. His decision had been based entirely on his own assumptions and prejudices, projected onto his clientele as justification. "I see," Coleman said quietly when Vincent failed to respond. So this was your personal assessment. I have to protect my business, Vincent said defensively. You don't understand the restaurant industry. Image is everything. Reputation determines success or failure. I understand more than you might think. Coleman's voice took on a different quality, not harder but somehow deeper. I understand that Marcus Bradley served 3 tours in Afghanistan. I understand that he lost his leg when an IED exploded under his patrol vehicle while he was trying to evacuate wounded civilians. I understand that he's been fighting a different kind of battle ever since, trying to find his place in a world that looks at his disability and sees a problem instead of a hero. Vincent felt heat rising in his cheeks. I didn't know any of that. You didn't ask. You made a judgment based on what you saw and decided he didn't belong. Coleman paused, letting the words settle. Tell me, Mr. Marconi, what does belong in your restaurant? The question seemed like a trap, but Vincent couldn't identify the specific danger. Paying customers who enhance the dining experience for others. Marcus had money. He was polite, quiet, caused no disturbance. He ordered water and examined your menu. By your own criteria, he was exactly the kind of customer you should want. But unless your real criteria are different than what you're telling me, Vincent found himself cornered by his own logic. Every justification he offered was systematically dismantled by Coleman's calm questioning. The SEAL wasn't shouting or threatening. He was simply forcing Vincent to confront the reality of his actions. Maybe I made a mistake, Vincent admitted. Quietly. Maybe? Coleman's eyebrow raised fractionally. Mr. Marconi, my team and I have spent the last 15 years in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. We faced enemy fire together, survived ambushes together, carried each other out of situations that would break most people. Marcus Bradley saved my life twice. I've saved his once. That creates bonds that don't break just because you take off the uniform. Vincent swallowed hard. I understand. No, you don't. Not yet. Coleman stood up, and in the confined space of the office, his presence seemed even more commanding. When you disrespected Marcus, you disrespected every man who served with him. You told a decorated warrior that his sacrifice wasn't worth basic human dignity. I never said anything like that. You didn't need to. Your actions spoke clearly enough. Coleman moved to the small window that looked out onto the alley behind the restaurant. Marcus doesn't complain. He doesn't make demands or expect special treatment. He just wants to live his life with the same respect any other citizen deserves. Last night you told him that wasn't possible. Vincent remained silent, recognizing that anything he said would likely make the situation worse. Coleman turned back to face him, and Vincent was struck by the controlled emotion in the man's expression. Do you know what Marcus did after he left here? No. He went back to his apartment. He sat on his couch and stared at the wall for 3 hours. Then he sent me a message. Do you know what it said? Vincent shook his head. Had dinner at Bella Vista. Owner made it clear I wasn't welcome. Thought you should know there are still places where the uniform doesn't matter. Coleman's voice remained steady, but something in his eyes had hardened. That's all. No anger, no demands for retribution, just disappointment that the country he served still had places where his sacrifice meant nothing. The weight of those words settled on Vincent like a physical burden. He'd imagined the veteran going home angry, perhaps planning some kind of revenge. The reality, quiet resignation to yet another rejection, was somehow worse. What do you want from me? Vincent asked. I want you to understand what you did. I want you to recognize that your business decision was actually a moral failure, and I want you to think about how you're going to make it right. I could apologize. You could. But apologies are words, Mr. Marconi. Marcus has heard plenty of words. What he needs is action that demonstrates respect rather than just claims it. Vincent leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed by the complexity of what he'd initially viewed as a simple situation. What kind of action? That's for you to figure out. But understand this, my team is watching. We're invested in how this resolves. Marcus doesn't know we're here, and we're not doing this for him. We're doing this for the principle he represents. Coleman moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Mr. Marconi. My men outside, they're not going anywhere until this situation is resolved to our satisfaction. They're not breaking any laws, not causing any trouble. They're just present. Visible reminders that actions have consequences. How long? Vincent asked weakly. However long it takes for you to understand what respect actually means. With that, Coleman opened the door and stepped back into the restaurant. Vincent remained in his chair, staring at the space the seal had occupied, trying to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. Through his small window, he could see portions of the alley where two more men had positioned themselves, not threatening, not aggressive, but unmistakably there. He pulled out his phone and called his insurance agent, though he suspected this wasn't a situation any policy would cover. Vincent emerged from his office to find his restaurant transformed into something resembling a museum exhibit. Customers frozen in place, conversations suspended, all attention focused on the unprecedented situation unfolding outside. Senior Chief Coleman had taken a position near the front windows where he could maintain visual contact with his team while observing the interior dynamics. Angela intercepted her husband near the service station, her face pale with concern. What did he say? What do they want? They want me to make things right with the veteran from last night, Vincent whispered, glancing nervously toward Coleman. They're not leaving until I do. Make things right how? Vincent realized he had no clear answer. Coleman's challenge had been deliberately vague, forcing him to confront the deeper implications of his actions rather than offering a simple checklist for redemption. Dr. Hoffman raised his hand tentatively, like a student seeking permission to speak. Excuse me, but could someone explain what's happening here? Should we be concerned for our safety? Coleman turned from the window, his movement drawing every eye in the room. You're in no danger, sir. This is a private matter between Mr. Marconi and my team. We apologize for any disruption to your meal. Are you police officers? Jennifer Palmer asked, her phone still recording discreetly. We're military personnel addressing a situation involving one of our own, Coleman replied with diplomatic precision. Again, no one here is in any danger. Harold Brennan cleared his throat, his weathered face showing recognition of something the others were missing. Son, are you talking about that fellow who was here yesterday evening? Quiet fellow walked. With a limp, Coleman's attention sharpened on the elderly veteran. Yes, sir. You noticed him? Hard not to. Recognized the bearing immediately. Military, no question. Saw him get asked to leave. Harold's voice carried disapproval. Didn't sit right with me then. Sits even worse now knowing you boys came looking. And for him, Vincent felt a flush of shame as Harold's words confirmed what he'd been trying to deny. His treatment of Marcus had been witnessed and judged by at least one person who understood its significance. What branch? Harold asked Coleman. Navy SEALs, sir. Harold's expression darkened further. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Vincent, you asked a SEAL to leave? What in hell were you thinking? The public nature of Harold's rebuke made Vincent's humiliation complete. Here was his most loyal customer, a man who'd been coming to Bella Vista for nearly a decade, expressing disgust at his treatment of Marcus. If Harold felt this way, how many other customers had been quietly appalled? I didn't know, Vincent said weakly. Didn't matter what branch he served, Harold shot back. Man deserved common courtesy regardless. But a SEAL? He shook his head in disbelief. Those boys go places the rest of us can't even imagine. do things that keep us safe while we sleep, and you turned one away because he didn't look pretty enough for your fancy restaurant." Angela touched her husband's arm. "Maybe we should close. For the day. Let everyone leave. Deal with this privately." "Nobody's leaving," Coleman said quietly. "This is a teaching moment. These folks are seeing exactly what happens when someone disrespects a veteran. They're witnessing the consequences of prejudice and the response it generates." Mark Garrett leaned over to his wife Lisa. "Should we take Emma somewhere else?" "The little girl is fine," Coleman assured him. "She's learning an important lesson about standing up for people who've sacrificed for their country." 8-year-old Emma Garrett had been watching the proceedings with the intense curiosity children bring to adult drama they don't fully understand. "Daddy, why is everyone upset?" Mark struggled for an age-appropriate explanation. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt other people's feelings. These men are trying to help fix one of those mistakes." Maria Henderson, the server who'd been working the previous evening, approached Vincent hesitantly. "Mr. Marconi, I was here when that gentleman came in. He seemed really nice. Polite, you know. Said please and thank you. Left a big tip, even though he barely touched his water." Vincent stared at her. "He left a tip? $20 for a glass of water and some bread." Most people would have been angry about being asked to leave, but he just nodded and paid. Even said, "Have a good evening," when he walked out. This detail hit Vincent harder than Coleman's military explanations or Harold's disapproval. Marcus had maintained his dignity even while being humiliated, had shown grace under pressure that spoke to character forged in unimaginable circumstances. "I think," said Dr. Hoffman carefully, "we're all learning something important here. About assumptions, about respect, about the price of service." His wife Susan nodded agreement. "My father was in Korea. He never talked about it much, but I know it changed him. The idea that someone would turn away a veteran because of war injuries." She shook her head. "It's unconscionable." Coleman's phone buzzed softly. He checked it briefly, then looked toward Vincent. "That was from one of my men outside. Word is spreading through town about what's happening here. Local news station is sending a crew." Vincent's stomach dropped. "News crew?" Apparently someone posted video on social media. The story of 12 SEALs surrounding a restaurant is gaining attention. Coleman's expression remained neutral. "Probably not the kind of publicity you were hoping for." Angela grabbed Vincent's arm. "We have to do something. Call that man, apologize, make this go away before it gets worse." "An apology isn't enough," Harold interjected. "Words are cheap. Actions matter." "What would you suggest?" Vincent asked, genuinely seeking guidance. Harold considered the question seriously. "In my day, when a man wronged another man, especially a fellow veteran, he made it right publicly. He acknowledged the mistake, took responsibility, and did something meaningful to demonstrate he'd learned." "Like what?" "That's for you to figure out. But it better be something substantial, something that shows you understand what that boy has been through and what his service means." Coleman received another text and checked his watch. "News crew will be here in 15 minutes. You might want to decide how you want this story to be told." Vincent realized his comfortable world was collapsing around him. What had seemed like a minor business decision was becoming a public examination of his character, his values, and his understanding of honor and sacrifice. "I need to call him," Vincent said suddenly. "The veteran, Marcus. I need to call him and apologize." "That's a start," Coleman acknowledged. "But understand that Marcus doesn't know we're here. He doesn't know about any of this. If you call him, it needs to be because you genuinely recognize what you did wrong, not because you're trying to make us go away." Vincent nodded, pulling out his phone. "Do you have his number?" "I do. But first, I want to hear what you plan to say to him." The entire restaurant waited in silence as Vincent struggled to find words adequate to the situation. How do you apologize? For prejudice? How do you express regret for dismissing someone's sacrifice? How do you acknowledge that your comfortable assumptions about who belongs where had caused real pain to someone who'd already endured more than most people could imagine? I'll tell him I was wrong, Vincent began slowly. That I misjudged him, that he's welcome here any time. And, Coleman prompted, and that I'm going to do something to make sure this never happens again, to any veteran. Coleman studied Vincent's face, apparently searching for sincerity beneath the fear and embarrassment. Outside, the sound of additional vehicles arriving suggested the situation was about to become even more complicated. Marcus Bradley sat in his cramped studio apartment, staring at the prosthetic leg propped against the wall near his bed. The afternoon sun streamed through the single window, casting geometric shadows across the sparse furnishings that defined his new civilian existence. A fold-out table, two mismatched chairs, a small television balanced on plastic storage containers, and the constant reminder of his changed circumstances. Medical equipment, pill bottles, and appointment cards scattered across the kitchen counter. His phone had been silent for hours, a mercy after the morning session with Dr. Sarah Whitman at the VA center. The psychiatrist had pressed him again about his increasing isolation, his reluctance to engage with the community, his tendency to retreat rather than confront the small daily humiliations that civilian life seemed to offer veterans like himself. You can't let one restaurant owner define your worth, she told him. These experiences say nothing about you and everything about their ignorance. Easy words from someone who'd never walked into a room and watched faces change as they noticed the prosthetic, the slight hitch in movement, the invisible scars that somehow seemed visible to people determined to see damage rather than service. The incident at Bella Vista hadn't surprised him. Disappointed, yes. Surprised, no. He'd encountered variations of Vincent Marconi's attitude before. The assumption that his disability made him unsuitable for polite society, that his presence somehow diminished the experience of normal customers. What had stung was the casual cruelty of it, the way Marconi had looked at him like he was a problem to be solved, rather than a human being seeking a simple meal. Marcus's secure phone buzzed, the encrypted device his old team still used for communication. He almost ignored it, assuming it was another check-in from one of his brothers, worried about his radio silence. But the message notification showed Coleman's call sign, and something in his gut told him to answer. Ghost here. Marcus, it's Reaper. We need to talk. The tone was all business, carrying the weight of command decisions and calculated risks. Marcus sat up straighter, muscle memory responding to Coleman's authority even in civilian circumstances. What's the situation? I'm at Bella Vista Restaurant. With the team, all of us. Silence stretched across the connection as Marcus processed this information. Why? Because sometimes civilians need education about respect. Because brotherhood doesn't end with discharge. Because what happened to you yesterday was unacceptable. Marcus felt a familiar mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. His brothers had always been protective, sometimes to a fault. In combat zones, that protection was essential survival. In civilian life, it could complicate already difficult situations. Reaper, I appreciate the gesture, but this isn't necessary. It was just one ignorant restaurant owner. Just one ignorant restaurant owner who needs to understand consequences. We're not causing trouble, Ghost. We're providing education. Through his window, Marcus could see activity on the street below. People gathering, pointing, talking animatedly about something happening nearby. His apartment was only 6 blocks from Bella Vista, close enough that news would travel quickly through Ocean View's tight-knit community. How bad is it? Depends on your perspective. The owner is getting a comprehensive lesson in military brotherhood. The customers are witnessing what happens when you disrespect a veteran. The community is learning that actions have consequences. Marcus, rubbed his forehead, feeling the familiar tension headache that accompanied complex social situations. Is anyone in danger? Only the owner's pride and his understanding of basic human decency. We're conducting this operation with full respect for civilian law and public safety. The military terminology wasn't accidental. Coleman was framing their response as a tactical operation, complete with objectives, rules of engagement, and desired outcomes. It was their way of bringing order to civilian chaos, of applying military precision to problems that couldn't be solved with weapons or traditional force. What do you need from me? Permission to continue. This is your call, Ghost. Say the word and we disappear. But understand that if we walk away now, nothing changes. This Marconi character learns nothing, does nothing, and the next veteran who walks into his restaurant gets the same treatment. Marcus stood and walked to his window, looking toward the direction of Bella Vista. Even from this distance, he could see unusual activity, more cars than normal, people congregating on sidewalks, the telltale signs of a significant event drawing. Public attention. What's your end game? Genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing, public recognition of your service and sacrifice, concrete actions to ensure this doesn't happen to other veterans, education for the broader community about what military service means and what respect looks like. These were noble objectives, Marcus knew, but they came with risks: media attention, public scrutiny, potential backlash against veterans who were perceived as using military connections to intimidate civilians. The last thing he wanted was to become a poster child for veteran grievances or to fuel resentment against the military community. Reaper, I don't want to be the face of some crusade. I just want to live quietly. I understand that, but sometimes living quietly enables the people who think they can treat veterans like second-class citizens. Sometimes the only way to earn respect is to demand it. Marcus considered this perspective. Throughout his military career, he'd fought for principles larger than himself: democracy, freedom, protection of the innocent. Perhaps civilian life required the same willingness to engage in battles that served purposes beyond personal comfort. Is he cooperating? He's beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. Whether that translates to meaningful change remains to be seen. Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown local number. He showed the screen to his secure device's camera so Coleman could see. That's probably him, Coleman confirmed. The restaurant owner. We encouraged him to reach out to you directly. Encouraged? We explained that apologies work better when they come from genuine remorse rather than external pressure. He asked, "For your number?" I gave it to him. Marcus stared at the phone, watching it buzz insistently. Answering meant engaging with the situation, accepting that his quiet existence had been disrupted whether he chose to participate or not. Ignoring it meant letting others fight battles he should face himself. "Ghost, you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here." "Your call. Answer it or don't. But know that we've got your back either way." Marcus accepted the incoming call, switching to speaker so Coleman could monitor the conversation. "This is Marcus. Mr. Bradley? This is Vincent Marconi, from Bella Vista Restaurant. I need to apologize to you." The voice was shaky, nervous, bearing little resemblance to the confident authority that had dismissed him the previous evening. Marcus glanced at his reflection in the window, a tired veteran in civilian clothes, dealing with consequences he'd never requested. "Go ahead. I was wrong last night, completely wrong. I judged you unfairly, treated you with disrespect, and violated every principle of decent hospitality. I'm deeply sorry." The words sounded rehearsed, but not insincere. Marcus could hear genuine distress in Marconi's voice, though whether it stemmed from moral recognition or fear of the seals currently surrounding his restaurant remained unclear. "Why are you apologizing now?" "Because I've learned things about You about your service, about what you've sacrificed for this country, because I've been forced to confront my own prejudices and recognize how wrong they were. Forced by whom? A pause. By some people who care about you very much and who weren't willing to let my actions go unchallenged. Marcus looked at his secure phone, knowing Coleman was listening to every word. What do you want from me, Mr. Marconi? I want to make this right. I want you to know you're welcome at Bella Vista any time. I want to do something meaningful to show I've learned from this mistake. Such as, I'm not sure yet, but something significant. Something that demonstrates respect for veterans and ensures this never happens again. Marcus considered the offer. Public vindication held appeal, but it also carried the risk of unwanted attention and community division. Sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice was simple dignity in the face of ignorance. The news van from Channel 7 pulled up just as Vincent finished his phone conversation with Marcus, its arrival adding another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. Rebecca Norton, a seasoned reporter known for her coverage of military affairs, emerged with her camera crew, immediately assessing the scene with professional efficiency. "Mr. Marconi," Coleman said quietly, "you're about to have company. I suggest you think carefully about how you want to represent yourself and your establishment." Through the front windows, Vincent could see Rebecca speaking with Tommy Crawford and Louis Graham, two of the SEALs who'd positioned themselves near the entrance. Their responses were measured and professional, providing enough information to explain their presence without compromising their mission or embarrassing Marcus unnecessarily. "What should I tell her?" Vincent asked, panic creeping into his voice. "The truth," Harold Brennan interjected from his table. "Tell her you made a mistake and you're trying to fix it. Tell her these boys are here because they believe in taking care of their own." Angela moved closer to her husband, her face pale with worry. "Vincent, our reputation, our business. Your reputation was damaged the moment you asked a decorated veteran to leave," Coleman observed. "Now you have an opportunity to rebuild it through proper action." Rebecca Norton entered the restaurant with the confident stride of someone accustomed to walking into complex situations. Her camera operator followed discreetly, capturing the unusual scene of military personnel, maintaining a respectful but unmistakable presence, while civilian diners continued their interrupted meals. "I'm Rebecca Norton, Channel 7 News. Could I speak with the owner?" Vincent stepped forward reluctantly, acutely aware that his next words would likely be broadcast throughout the region. "That's me, Vincent Marconi." "Mr. Marconi, we've received reports about an incident involving a veteran and your response to military personnel who've gathered outside your restaurant. Could you explain what's happening here?" Vincent glanced at Coleman, who offered no guidance beyond a slight nod that suggested he should answer truthfully. The weight of dozens of eyes, customers, SEALs, news crew, pressed down on him as he struggled to find appropriate words. "Last night I made a serious error in judgment. A veteran came to dine here, and I asked him to leave based on assumptions that were completely wrong and unfair." "What kind of assumptions?" Vincent felt sweat beading on his forehead. "I thought he might make other customers uncomfortable. He had a prosthetic leg and seemed, I don't know, different. I was worried about the image of my restaurant. And these military personnel outside? They're here because the veteran I turned away is someone they served with. They're not threatening anyone or breaking any laws. They're just making a point about respect and accountability." Rebecca turned to Coleman, who'd been observing the interview with professional interest. "Could you tell us about your relationship with the veteran in question?" "Marcus Bradley is a decorated Navy SEAL who lost his leg serving our country in Afghanistan," Coleman replied with calm authority. "He's a man of exceptional character who deserves the same respect and courtesy extended to any citizen. When we learned about his treatment here, we felt it necessary to address the situation. Are you threatening Mr. Marconi or his business? We're educating him about the consequences of disrespecting veterans. Sometimes people need to understand that their actions affect real human beings who've made real sacrifices. Dr. Hoffman raised his hand tentatively. If I may interrupt, I think what's happening here is important for all of us to witness. This gentleman, he gestured toward Coleman, and his colleagues are demonstrating what loyalty and brotherhood actually mean. Are you a customer here? Rebecca asked. Regular customer for years. My wife and I come here monthly, but after watching this situation unfold, after learning about how a veteran was treated, I have to say my perspective on this establishment has changed significantly. Susan Hoffman nodded agreement. What happened to that veteran could happen to my father, to any veteran. The idea that someone would be turned away because their war injuries made them seem different is absolutely unacceptable. Rebecca's camera operator was capturing these testimonials, building a narrative that extended far beyond Vincent's individual mistake. This was becoming a story about community values, about how civilians treated the veterans living among them, about the price of service and the obligation of gratitude. Mr. Marconi, what are you planning to do to address this situation? Vincent looked around the room, at Harold's disapproving expression, at his wife's worried face, at Coleman's watchful eyes, at customers who were seeing him in an entirely new light. I've apologized to Mr. Bradley personally. I've invited him back as an honored guest, but I realize that's not enough. What would be enough? The question hung in the air as Vincent struggled with an answer he hadn't fully formulated. What gesture could adequately address the dismissal of a veteran's sacrifice? What action could demonstrate genuine understanding rather than mere damage control? I think, Vincent said slowly, I need to do something that ensures this never happens again, not just here but anywhere, something that honors veterans and educates people like me who clearly don't understand what military service means. Maria Henderson approached cautiously, addressing the camera directly. I was working last night when that gentleman came in. He was polite, respectful, left a generous tip even though he barely had anything. When Mr. Marconi asked him to leave, he just nodded and walked out with dignity. That's the kind of person he is. Her testimony added another layer to the emerging narrative. Marcus as a man of character who'd handled humiliation with grace, while his brothers responded with principled action. Coleman's phone buzzed. He checked it briefly, then looked toward Vincent. That was Marcus. He's agreed to meet with you personally to discuss how to move forward. Vincent felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. When? Now. He's walking over. The announcement sent a ripple through the restaurant. The central figure in this drama, the veteran whose treatment had triggered everything, was about to arrive. Rebecca immediately positioned her crew to capture his entrance, while maintaining respectful distance. I should probably prepare, Vincent said uncertainly. There's nothing to prepare, Coleman replied. Just be honest, acknowledge what you did wrong, listen to what he has to say, and be ready to follow through on whatever commitments you make. Through the windows, Vincent could see a figure approaching on foot, a man walking with the careful gait of someone adapting to a prosthetic limb, moving with quiet determination toward a confrontation he'd never sought but was now ready to face. Harold Brennan stood up from his table, straightening his shoulders in a gesture of military bearing that transcended his civilian clothes. Boys, he called to the SEALs, you did right coming here. That man deserves better than what he got. Thank you, sir, Coleman replied with genuine respect. We appreciate your support. The restaurant fell silent as Marcus Bradley reached the entrance, his arrival marking the beginning of what everyone present understood would be a defining moment. not just for Vincent and his business, but for the community's understanding of honor, sacrifice, and the obligations that civilians owe to those who've served. Vincent took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether his mistake became a catalyst for meaningful change or merely the beginning of his business's decline. Outside, the remaining members of the SEAL team maintained their positions, silent guardians, ensuring that their brother would receive the respect he'd earned through service and sacrifice. Marcus Bradley paused at the entrance to Bella Vista, his hand resting on the brass handle that had seemed so unwelcoming 24 hours earlier. Through the glass, he could see the assembled crowd, his former teammates, restaurant customers, news crew, and at the center of it all, Vincent Marconi standing rigid with apprehension. The careful choreography of the moment wasn't lost on him. This wasn't just a personal reconciliation, but a public examination of values and accountability. He pushed open the door and stepped inside, immediately noting how Coleman and his team had positioned themselves to provide security without creating intimidation. Their presence was protective rather than threatening, a subtle but important distinction that spoke to their professionalism and respect for civilian law. Marcus, Coleman acknowledged with a slight nod, using his real name rather than his call. Sign in the civilian setting, Reaper. Marcus's response was equally measured, acknowledging their brotherhood while maintaining appropriate formality for the public audience. Vincent stepped forward, his movement awkward with nervous energy. Up close, Marcus could see the genuine distress in the restaurant owner's expression. This wasn't someone trying to manipulate his way out of trouble, but a man confronting the uncomfortable reality of his own prejudices. Mr. Bradley, thank you for coming. I know this must be difficult. Marcus studied Vincent's face, reading the micro-expressions that years of tactical assessment had trained him to notice. Fear, yes, but also shame, and what appeared to be genuine remorse. Mr. Marconi, I understand you wanted to speak with me. I owe you an apology. A real one, not just words, but understanding of what I did wrong. Rebecca Norton positioned herself where she could capture the conversation without intruding, her camera operator following her lead with professional discretion. This was clearly a significant moment, but they were documenting rather than directing. I'm listening, Marcus said simply. Vincent took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. Last night, when you came in, I saw your prosthetic leg, and I made assumptions. I thought you might make other customers uncomfortable. I thought you didn't fit the image I wanted for this place. I was wrong on every level. Why were you wrong? The directness of Marcus's question caught Vincent off guard. He'd expected to deliver his prepared apology and move toward resolution, but Marcus was pushing him to examine the deeper implications of his actions. Because I judged you based on your disability rather than your character. Because I assumed that your sacrifice in service to our country somehow made you less worthy of respect rather than more deserving of it. Because I let my own shallow concerns about image override basic human decency. Harold Brennan watched from his table, nodding approval at Vincent's words while clearly evaluating their sincerity. As a veteran himself, he understood the complexities of civilian-military relations and the subtle forms of discrimination that veterans often faced. What have you learned? Marcus asked. That you're a decorated Navy SEAL who lost your leg serving in Afghanistan. That you've been through experiences I can't imagine and shown courage I'll never possess. That when I asked you to leave, I wasn't just turning away a customer. I was disrespecting a hero. Marcus shook his head slightly. I'm not a hero, Mr. Marconi. I'm a veteran trying to build a civilian life. The problem isn't that you failed to recognize my military service. It's that you failed to treat me like a human being deserving of basic respect. The distinction was important, and Vincent seemed to grasp it. This wasn't about special treatment for veterans, but about fundamental dignity for all people, regardless of their appearance or perceived differences. You're right. I should have treated you with respect, regardless of whether you'd served in the military. But the fact that I did serve makes it worse, Marcus continued, because it suggests that even people who've sacrificed for this country aren't safe from discrimination. Based on their disabilities, Dr. Hoffman leaned forward from his table, unable to remain silent. If I may, Mr. Bradley, what you're describing isn't unique to veterans. People with disabilities face this kind of treatment regularly. But when it happens to someone who was injured in service to their country, it seems particularly unconscionable. Marcus turned to acknowledge the doctor's comment. You're absolutely right. Disability discrimination is wrong, regardless of how someone acquired their disability. But there's an added layer of betrayal when it happens to veterans, the sense that the country they served doesn't value their continued presence. Coleman had remained silent, allowing Marcus to drive the conversation, but now he stepped forward, slightly. Marcus, tell them about the transition. Marcus hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with public exposure of his personal struggles. But he seemed to recognize the educational value of his testimony. When you leave the military, especially after an injury, you're starting over in a world that often doesn't understand what you've been through. Simple things become complicated: finding work, navigating social situations, dealing with people's reactions to your disabilities. You hope that your service means something, that people will at least treat you with basic courtesy. When that doesn't happen, it reinforces the isolation you're already feeling. Angela Marconi, who had been listening from behind the service, counter wiped tears from her eyes. I had no idea. Vincent we never thought about it that way. Most people don't, Marcus replied without accusation. That's why education matters more than punishment. Vincent seized on this opening. What can I do? Not just to apologize, but to make sure other veterans don't face what you faced. Marcus considered the question carefully. Around the restaurant, conversations had stopped as everyone focused on his response. This was the moment that would define not just Vincent's redemption, but the broader impact of the entire incident. First, train your staff about disability accommodation and veteran issues. Make sure everyone understands that military service often comes with visible and invisible wounds that deserve respect, not discrimination. Vincent nodded eagerly. Done. What else? Second, make Bella Vista a genuinely welcoming place for veterans. Not just a sign or a discount, but real understanding and accommodation. How do I do that? Tommy Crawford spoke for the first time since entering the restaurant. Partner with veteran organizations, host events for local veterans, make it clear, through actions, not just words, that military families are valued here. Marcus looked at Tommy with appreciation before continuing. Third, use this experience to educate the broader community. What happened here isn't unique. It happens to veterans and people with disabilities throughout this community. Help change. Rebecca Norton stepped forward with a question. Mr. Bradley, are you satisfied with Mr. Marconi's response so far? Marcus studied Vincent's face once more, searching for signs of genuine commitment versus mere damage control. I'm encouraged by his willingness to learn and change. Whether I'm satisfied will depend on whether his actions match his words over time. What would convince you? Consistent behavior, real partnerships with veteran organizations, evidence that he's internalized these lessons rather than just applying temporary fixes to manage this crisis. Vincent pulled out his phone. I want to make some calls right now. There's a veterans center downtown, right? And the VFW hall. I want to reach out to them today, not next week or next month. Marcus exchanged glances with Coleman, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of approval. The immediacy of Vincent's response suggested genuine urgency rather than calculated delay. That would be a good start, Marcus acknowledged. "Mr. Bradley," Harold Brennan called from his table. "Speaking as another veteran, I think you're handling this with remarkable grace. Your brothers here," he gestured toward the SEALs. "They did right by coming to support you. Thank you, sir. Their support means everything to me." The moment carried weight beyond its immediate context, one veteran acknowledging another's dignity, while recognizing the brotherhood that transcends individual service branches and generations. Vincent looked around the restaurant, taking in the faces of customers who would undoubtedly share this story throughout the community. "I want everyone here to know that what happened last night will never happen again. Not just because of who Mr. Bradley is, but because every person who enters this establishment deserves respect and courtesy." Marcus extended his hand toward Vincent, a gesture that surprised everyone present. "Mr. Marconi, I accept your apology. I hope this experience helps both of us become better people." Vincent shook Marcus's hand with visible relief and gratitude. But Marcus wasn't finished. "Now, if you're serious about making changes, I'd like to suggest we continue this conversation over dinner. Here, tonight, with some of my brothers and anyone from the community who wants to discuss how we can make Ocean View more welcoming for all veterans." The suggestion transformed a moment of personal reconciliation into an opportunity for broader community engagement, exactly the kind of constructive outcome that Coleman and his team had hoped to achieve. The afternoon sun was beginning to set over Ocean View as word spread throughout the community about the evening gathering at Bella Vista. Vincent had spent the last 3 hours making phone calls to the Veterans Administration Center, the local VFW post, the American Legion chapter, and several non-profit organizations serving military families. Each conversation had been humbling, revealing the depth of his ignorance about veteran issues and the extent of the support network he'd never known existed in his own community. "Jim Patterson from the VFW is coming," Vincent announced to Angela, as they prepared the restaurant for an unprecedented evening. "So is Grace Chen from the Military Family Support Network. They're bringing maybe a dozen other veterans and family members." Angela surveyed the dining room they were hastily reconfiguring. "Should we charge for the meals?" "No," Vincent said immediately. "This is on us, all of it. It's the least we can do." Tony Russell, the head chef, emerged from the kitchen wiping his hands on his apron. "Boss, I've got enough food to feed 40 people. Maria and Carlos are staying late to help serve. We're treating this like the most important dinner service we've ever done." Outside, Coleman's team had begun to disperse. Their mission accomplished, but their presence still providing subtle security for the evening's events. Marcus had requested they stay for dinner, not as intimidating enforcers, but as honored guests who demonstrated the true meaning of loyalty and brotherhood. Rebecca Norton was preparing for a live broadcast from outside the restaurant, her camera operator capturing the steady stream of community members arriving for what local social media was already calling the dinner that changed everything. "This is Rebecca Norton reporting from Bella Vista Restaurant in Ocean View, where what began as a discrimination incident has evolved into a community conversation about veteran respect and inclusion." Local business owner Vincent Marconi, who acknowledged asking a disabled Navy SEAL to leave his establishment last night, has invited the community to join him for an evening of dialogue and education. Inside, Marcus sat at what had been designated the head table, flanked by Coleman and Tommy Crawford. The irony wasn't lost on him. 24 hours ago, he'd been asked to leave this same space. Now he was the guest of honor at a gathering designed to prevent similar incidents from occurring to other veterans. Dr. Sarah Whitman, Marcus's VA psychiatrist, had arrived 30 minutes early, bringing with her a folder of materials about veteran transition issues, and disability accommodation. Marcus, I have to say, this is the most constructive response to discrimination I've witnessed in my 15 years of practice. It wasn't my idea, Marcus replied, gesturing toward Coleman. Credit goes to my brothers for refusing to let it slide. The idea to turn it into community education was yours, Coleman countered. That's what made this worthwhile, transforming a negative experience into positive change. Harold Brennan approached their table, moving with the careful dignity of an 80-year-old veteran who'd maintained his military bearing across 6 decades of civilian life. Son, I wanted to thank you for how you handled this situation. You could have been angry, could have demanded revenge. Instead, you chose education. That's the mark of true leadership. Thank you, sir. Your support this afternoon meant a lot. In my day, we didn't talk much about what the war did to us. Different time, different understanding, but watching you speak honestly about the challenges veterans face, that takes courage. Jim Patterson from the VFW entered with a group of 6 other veterans, their ages spanning from Vietnam-era service members to recent Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. Vincent approached them immediately, extending his hand in greeting. Mr. Patterson, thank you for coming. I know this is unusual circumstances. Mr. Marconi, what happened to Marcus could happen to any of us. The fact that you're willing to learn from it and do something constructive speaks well of your character. Grace Chen arrived with representatives from 3 different military support organizations, each bringing information about programs and services that Vincent had never known existed in his own community. The scope of veteran needs, from job placement to mental health support to family counseling, was staggering in its complexity. We're not asking you to solve all veteran problems, Grace explained as they settled at a large table. But understanding what veterans face helps civilians recognize when they can make a difference through simple courtesy and accommodation. Angela moved through the room, ensuring water glasses were filled and appetizers were available. But her attention was focused on the conversations happening around her. At one table, a female Marine veteran was explaining to Dr. Hoffman's wife the challenges of transitioning from military structure to civilian flexibility. At another, an older Army veteran was sharing with Jennifer Palmer the difficulties of finding employment that recognized military skills and experience. Vincent found himself at a table with Lewis Graham, the SEAL team medic, and 2 local veterans. One from the Persian Gulf War, another from recent deployments to Syria. Their discussion centered on the invisible wounds of military service and how civilian communities could better support veterans dealing with PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and adjustment disorders. The physical injuries are obvious, Luis explained. People see a prosthetic leg or missing arm and understand something happened. But the psychological wounds are invisible, and sometimes those are harder to deal with because people don't recognize them. What should civilians look for? Vincent asked. Nothing specific, the Syria veteran replied. Just treat everyone with respect and understand that you don't know what anyone has been through. Military or civilian, everyone deserves basic courtesy. Marcus stood and moved to the center of the dining room, his voice carrying clearly without shouting. Before we eat, I'd like to say something to everyone who came tonight. The room quieted, conversations pausing as attention focused on the man whose experience had catalyzed the evening's gathering. 24 hours ago, I was asked to leave this restaurant because my disability made someone uncomfortable. I went home feeling isolated and unwelcome in my own community. Tonight, I'm surrounded by neighbors, fellow veterans, and new friends who've demonstrated that Ocean View is actually a place where people care about each other and work to solve problems together. Spontaneous applause broke out, led by Harold Brennan, and quickly spreading throughout the room. What Mr. Marconi did wrong last night was serious, Marcus continued. But his response today, his willingness to learn, to change, and to bring the community together, that's what defines character. Not the mistakes we make, but how we respond to them. Vincent felt emotion tightening his throat as he realized the depth of grace Marcus was extending. This could have been a night of public humiliation and business destruction. Instead, it had become an opportunity for community building and mutual understanding. "I want to make a commitment to everyone here," Vincent announced, standing to address the room. "Bella Vista Restaurant will become a certified veteran-friendly business. We'll train our staff on veteran issues and disability accommodation. We'll host monthly gatherings for veterans and their families. And we'll work with local organizations to support veteran transition programs." "That's a significant commitment," Grace Chen observed. "Are you prepared for what that involves?" "I'm prepared to learn what it involves and do whatever is necessary to fulfill it," Vincent replied. "These conversations tonight have shown me how much I don't know about the people in my own community." Coleman approached Vincent with a formal expression that suggested official business. "Mr. Marconi, my team and I will be departing Ocean View tomorrow morning. But before we go, we want to present you with something." He handed Vincent a plaque bearing the Navy SEAL trident and an inscription. "Presented to Bella Vista Restaurant, in recognition of your commitment to honoring those who serve. From Zeal Team 7, Vincent's hands shook as he read the inscription. "I don't deserve this. You will," Coleman replied, "through your actions going forward." Rebecca Norton entered with her camera crew, having received permission to document the conclusion of the evening's events. The transformation from morning confrontation to evening celebration provided a powerful narrative of community growth and reconciliation. "Mr. Bradley," she asked, "how do you feel about how this situation has resolved?" Marcus looked around the room, at veterans sharing stories with civilians, at Vincent eagerly taking notes about accommodation practices, at Angela learning about military family challenges from Grace Chen, at his SEAL brothers engaging respectfully with community members. "I feel hopeful," he said simply. "This morning, I thought yesterday's incident was just another example of veteran discrimination. Tonight, I see it was actually the beginning of something much more positive, a community coming together to understand and support each other better." The evening concluded with exchanged contact information, scheduled follow-up meetings, and concrete plans for ongoing veteran support programs. What had begun as a moment of discrimination had evolved into a model for community reconciliation and proactive inclusion. 3 weeks later, Bella Vista Restaurant had undergone a transformation that extended far beyond its physical appearance. The walls now displayed a carefully curated collection of military memorabilia donated by local veterans, service medals, unit patches, and photographs spanning 7 decades of American military service. More importantly, the atmosphere had shifted from exclusive elegance to inclusive warmth, welcoming families, veterans, and community members who might have previously felt unwelcome. Marcus Bradley sat at his regular table, a corner spot near the windows that provided good situational awareness while allowing him to observe the restaurant's new dynamic. His weekly lunch at Bella Vista had become a fixture, not as a statement of forgiveness, but as a demonstration that genuine change was possible when people committed to growth rather than defensiveness. "The usual, Mr. Bradley," Maria Henderson asked, approaching with the friendly familiarity that had developed over their repeated interactions. "Please, and how's your brother adjusting to civilian life?" Maria's younger brother had recently completed his army service and was struggling with the transition challenges that Marcus knew intimately. Through his connection to the restaurant, Maria had gained access to veteran support resources she'd never known existed. "Much better, thanks to those contacts you provided. The job training program through the Veteran Center has been perfect for him. At the neighboring table, Dr. Hoffman was having lunch with Colonel William Cross, Marcus's former commanding officer who'd driven down from Camp Pendleton for the restaurant's first official Veterans Appreciation Thursday. The monthly event had exceeded everyone's expectations, drawing military families from throughout the region and creating a sustainable model for veteran community engagement. The psychological impact of community acceptance can't be understated, Dr. Hoffman was explaining to the colonel. When veterans feel welcomed and valued by civilians, it significantly improves their transition outcomes and mental health. Vincent emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of complimentary appetizers for the veteran tables, a practice he'd instituted after learning about the financial struggles many veterans faced during their transition to civilian employment. His transformation from reluctant host to enthusiastic advocate had been remarkable to witness. "Marcus, there's someone I'd like you to meet," Vincent said, approaching with a middle-aged woman wearing a small American flag pin on her jacket lapel. "This is Janet Collins, the new social worker from the VA Center." Janet shook Marcus's hand with the professional warmth of someone accustomed to working with military personnel. "Mr. Bradley, I've heard wonderful things about your role in creating this veteran-friendly environment. We're hoping to replicate this model at other businesses throughout the county." "It wasn't my idea originally," Marcus replied, gesturing toward an empty chair. "But I'm glad it's working. Please join us." Janet settled at the table, pulling out a folder of documentation. "We've had 12 other restaurants express interest in becoming certified veteran-friendly establishments. After seeing the coverage of what happened here, the demand for training and certification has exceeded our capacity." "What kind of training?" Vincent asked, genuinely curious about expanding his understanding. "Disability accommodation, PTSD awareness, understanding military culture, recognizing signs of veteran distress, connecting veterans with appropriate resources. It's comprehensive, but not overwhelming." Angela approached the table, carrying the afternoon's local newspaper, her expression mixing pride with residual amazement at their restaurant's unexpected transformation. "Have you seen today's editorial?" She placed the paper on the table, folded, to reveal an opinion piece titled, "When Business Leaders Choose Growth Over Defensiveness, the Bella Vista Model." The article, written by David Crane, the newspaper's editor, praised Vincent's response to the initial incident and called for other business owners to examine their own practices regarding veteran and disability inclusion. Vincent Marconi could have responded to criticism with anger and legal threats. Vincent read aloud. Instead, he chose education and transformation, turning a moment of discrimination into a catalyst for community improvement. His example demonstrates that genuine leadership requires the courage to admit mistakes and the commitment to meaningful change. Marcus smiled at Vincent's obvious pride in the recognition. "How does it feel to be held up as a model business owner?" "Terrifying and inspiring in equal measure," Vincent admitted. "Every day I learn something new about the veteran community that makes me realize how much I still don't understand." "That's the point," Janet observed. "Cultural competency isn't a destination. It's an ongoing process of learning and adjustment." The lunch crowd included its usual mixture of business professionals and tourists, but now also featured a steady presence of military families who discovered Bella Vista through word-of-mouth recommendations in veteran networks. The demographic shift had actually increased overall business, challenging Vincent's original assumptions about excluding certain customers to maintain profitability. Tommy Crawford entered the restaurant wearing civilian clothes but carrying the unmistakable bearing that identified him to other veterans. He'd driven down from his base in San Diego specifically to support the Veterans Appreciation Thursday event and to check on Marcus's continued integration into the Ocean View community. "Ghost, how's civilian life treating you?" "Better than expected, Tank, especially since I found a place where I can eat lunch without being judged." Tommy joined their table, accepting Vincent's offer of the day's special with the easy camaraderie that had developed between the former adversaries. "The team wanted me to tell you that other units are implementing similar response protocols. When veterans face discrimination, especially disability-related discrimination, we're not staying silent anymore." "Response protocols?" Janet asked, with professional interest. "Nothing aggressive or illegal," Tommy clarified, "but organized, visible support for veterans who've been mistreated. The goal is education and community awareness, not confrontation." Vincent considered this information thoughtfully. So what happened here might happen other places. Already has. 3 incidents in the last month where SEAL teams or other special operations units have provided respectful but unmistakable support for veterans facing discrimination. 2 resulted in positive outcomes similar to yours. 1 is still ongoing. Marcus felt a mixture of pride and concern about his experience becoming a model for veteran advocacy. "I hope the focus remains on education rather than intimidation." "It does," Tommy assured him. "Coleman made it clear that our response here worked, because it emphasized respect and dialogue rather than force or threats. That's become the template." Harold Brennan approached their table, moving with the careful dignity of advanced age, but maintaining the erect posture of lifelong military bearing. At 82, he'd become an unofficial ambassador between the restaurant's veteran community and its civilian patrons. "Marcus, I wanted to introduce you to my grandson. He's thinking about military service and has some questions." A nervous-looking young man of perhaps 18 followed Harold to the table, clearly impressed by the presence of actual Navy SEALs. "Sir, my grandfather says you were in Afghanistan?" 3 tours, Marcus confirmed. "What branch are you considering?" "Navy, sir. Maybe special operations." Marcus exchanged glances with Tommy, both recognizing the familiar combination of enthusiasm and naivety that characterized potential recruits. "Have you talked to current service members about what that entails?" "Not really, sir. Just movies and stuff. Tank here can give you realistic information about special operations training and deployment. But remember, military service is about serving something larger than yourself, not about personal glory or adventure." The conversation that followed provided exactly the kind of mentorship opportunity that Vincent's original discrimination had nearly prevented. Young people in the community now had access to realistic guidance about military service from veterans who understood both its sacrifices and its rewards. Rebecca Norton arrived with a small camera crew, having been invited to document the 3-week progress of the restaurant's transformation. Her original story about the discrimination incident had evolved into an ongoing series about community reconciliation and veteran inclusion. "Mr. Marconi, 3 weeks ago you were facing potential boycotts and negative publicity. Now you're being held up as a model for other businesses. How do you explain that transformation?" Vincent looked around the dining room, at veterans and civilians sharing meals and conversations, at his staff confidently accommodating diverse needs, at the walls displaying military history and sacrifice, at Marcus quietly mentoring a potential recruit. "I learned that my assumptions about what makes a business successful were completely wrong," he said simply. "I thought excluding people who seemed different would protect my reputation. Instead, including everyone and treating all customers with dignity has made this a better place for everyone." What advice would you give to other business owners? Don't wait for a crisis to examine your practices. Don't assume you know what your customers want without asking them. And remember that veterans are part of your community, whether you acknowledge them or not. You can choose to welcome them or ignore them, but they've earned the right to be treated with respect. As the afternoon progressed, the restaurant filled with the comfortable sounds of conversation and community, exactly the atmosphere Vincent had originally sought to create, but now achieved through inclusion rather than exclusion. The transformation was complete, but more importantly, it was sustainable, built on genuine understanding rather than temporary public relations management. 6 months after the incident that transformed Bella Vista Restaurant, Marcus Bradley stood before the Ocean View City Council, delivering testimony that would establish the community's first comprehensive veteran inclusion initiative. The council chambers were packed with military families, business owners, and civic leaders who'd witnessed the evolution of what had begun as a single act of discrimination into a model for community-wide change. When I was asked to leave Bella Vista 6 months ago, Marcus began, his voice steady and clear, I thought it was just another example of the challenges veterans face in civilian society. I couldn't have imagined that it would become the catalyst for transforming how our entire community treats and supports military families. In the front row, Vincent and Angela Marconi sat alongside Coleman and 3 other members of Marcus's former SEAL team who'd remained in Ocean View to help establish the veteran support programs that had grown far beyond anyone's original expectations. The restaurant owner, who'd once seen Marcus as a threat to his business image, now served as co-chair of the city's Veterans Affairs Committee. Mayor Robert Sterling reviewed the proposal documents spread before him. Mr. Bradley, this initiative would affect every business in Ocean View. Are you confident there's community support for such comprehensive changes? Mr. Mayor, 23 businesses have already completed voluntary, veteran-friendly certification through our pilot program. 15 others are in the process. The economic impact has been entirely positive. These businesses report increased patronage and improved community reputation. Dr. Sarah Whitman stood to offer supporting testimony. From a medical perspective, the mental health outcomes for veterans in Ocean View have improved dramatically since this initiative began. When veterans feel welcomed and valued by their community, it directly impacts their successful transition to civilian life. City Councilwoman Maria Fletcher reviewed her notes before addressing the Assembly. The financial commitment required for citywide implementation is significant. Training programs, certification processes, ongoing monitoring. Are we certain this investment will yield measurable returns? Grace Chen from the Military Family Support Network approached the podium. With a folder of documentation, Councilwoman Fletcher, we've tracked measurable improvements across multiple metrics. Veteran unemployment in Ocean View has decreased by 37%. Utilization of mental health services has increased, while crisis interventions have decreased. Property values in neighborhoods with high veteran populations have stabilized and begun rising. Harold Brennan, now recognized as the community's eldest statesman on veteran affairs, slowly stood to address the council. Ladies and gentlemen, I've lived in Ocean View for 43 years. I've watched this community grow and change, but I've never seen anything like what's happened since that evening at Bella Vista. Young people are staying after military service instead of leaving for more welcoming cities. Military families are choosing to settle here. That's economic development. You can't buy with tax incentives or marketing campaigns. The testimony continued for nearly 2 hours, with business owners describing increased patronage, educators reporting improved military family engagement in schools, and healthcare providers documenting better veteran health outcomes. The transformation had created a positive feedback loop that strengthened multiple aspects of community life. Judge Patricia Caldwell, attending as a private citizen rather than in her official capacity, stood to share her perspective. 6 months ago, we witnessed what appeared to be a simple case of business discrimination. Instead, we discovered it was an opportunity to examine our community's values and make conscious choices about inclusion and respect. The results speak for themselves. Rebecca Norton, who'd covered the story from its beginning, addressed the council as both a journalist and community member. This initiative has attracted national attention to Ocean View. We've been featured in military publications, business journals, and community development case studies. The publicity value alone justifies the investment, but the human benefits make it essential. Marcus returned to the podium for closing remarks, his presence commanding the respectful attention of everyone present. 6 months ago, I was a disabled veteran struggling to find my place in civilian society. Today, I'm employed as a coordinator for veteran services, helping other military families navigate the transition to community life. That transformation didn't happen through government programs or federal mandates. It happened because one business owner chose to learn from his mistakes, and an entire community decided to do better. Vincent stood up from his seat, an action that surprised the council and audience. "Mr. Mayor, if I may address the council?" "Of course, Mr. Marconi." Vincent moved to the podium, his nervousness evident, but his determination clear. 6 months ago, I made a decision based on ignorance and prejudice that could have destroyed my business and damaged our community. Instead, through Marcus's grace and the support of his military brothers, it became an opportunity for education and growth. Today, Bella Vista isn't just a more successful business. It's a gathering place where civilians and veterans build relationships that strengthen our entire community. He paused, looking around the packed chamber. The financial investment required for this initiative is minimal compared to its potential benefits. But more importantly, it's simply the right thing to do. These men and women have served our country. The least we can do is ensure they feel welcomed in their own communities. Coleman approached the podium for the final testimony of the evening. "Mr. Mayor, members of the council, 6 months ago, my team came to Ocean View to support a brother who'd been mistreated. We expected to spend a day addressing a single incident of discrimination. Instead, we discovered a community willing to examine its practices and make meaningful changes. Today, Ocean View serves as a model for other communities throughout the country." Mayor Sterling consulted with the other council members before addressing the assembly. "We'll take this proposal under advisement and schedule a formal vote for next week's meeting. However, I can say that the testimony tonight has been compelling, and the documented results of the pilot program speak to the initiative's effectiveness." As the meeting concluded, Marcus found himself surrounded by community members wanting to express support and share their own experiences with the veteran inclusion efforts. The transformation from isolated individual to community leader had been gradual but profound, built on the foundation of respect and dignity that Coleman's intervention had demanded. Tommy Crawford approached as the crowd began to disperse. "Ghost, the team's heading back to base tomorrow. You good here?" Marcus looked around the chamber, at Vincent deep in conversation with other business owners about expansion of the certification program, at Harold Brennan discussing military history with fascinated teenagers, at Grace Chen coordinating with city staff about implementation logistics, at Angela Marconi exchanging contact information with military spouses interested in employment opportunities. "I'm good, Tank." "More than good. This is home now. You've built something important here, something that's going to help a lot of veterans who come after you. We built it. All of us. The difference is that now it's sustainable, institutionalized. It doesn't depend on one person or one incident." Coleman joined their conversation, his expression reflecting satisfaction with outcomes that had exceeded all original expectations. "Marcus, the team's proud of what you've accomplished here. But more than that, we're grateful. You turned a moment of personal injustice into a victory for every veteran who'll benefit from these programs." "I had good teachers," Marcus replied, looking at his former teammates. "You showed me that standing up for principles matters, even in civilian life." Outside the council chambers, Vincent approached Marcus one final time before the SEAL team's departure. "Marcus, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. Thank you for giving me the chance to do better. Thank you for showing me that my assumptions were wrong and helping me become the kind of business owner, the kind of person I should have been all along. Vincent, what you've built here goes far beyond making up for one mistake. You've created something that will help veterans for years to come. That's the kind of legacy that matters." As the group dispersed into the warm California evening, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him from isolation to community leadership. 6 months ago, he'd been a disabled veteran struggling to find his place in civilian society. Tonight, he was a respected community advocate with meaningful work and strong relationships. The black SUVs departed Ocean View the next morning, their mission complete, but their impact permanent. They left behind a transformed community, a successful model for veteran inclusion, and the understanding that sometimes the most powerful form of service is simply refusing to let injustice go unchallenged. The story of Bella Vista Restaurant had become the story of Ocean View itself, a community that chose growth over defensiveness, inclusion over exclusion, and respect over indifference. It was a story that would continue long after the headlines faded, written in the daily interactions between veterans and civilians who'd learned to see each other as neighbors, friends, and fellow citizens deserving of dignity and respect. Brotherhood, it turned out, was about more than military service. It was about the bonds that form when people choose to stand up for each other, to learn from their mistakes, and to build something better together than any of them could achieve alone. 1 year after the incident that changed everything, Marcus Bradley stood in the newly constructed Veterans Resource Center on Pacific Coast Highway, watching construction workers install the final pieces of adaptive equipment that would make the facility fully accessible to veterans with all types of disabilities. The 5,000-square-foot building, funded through a combination of city resources and private donations, represented the most tangible evidence of Ocean View's transformation from a community that tolerated veterans to one that actively supported them. "The job training lab should be operational by next week," announced Bill Lawson, the Chamber of Commerce president who'd initially been skeptical of the Veteran Inclusion Initiative, but had become one of its strongest advocates. "We've got commitments from 12 local employers to provide apprenticeships and direct hiring opportunities for program graduates." Dr. James Mitchell, the orthopedic surgeon who'd volunteered to provide medical consultations at the center, examined the physical therapy equipment being installed in the rehabilitation wing. "This setup rivals what we have at the VA hospital. Veterans won't have to drive 2 hours for specialized care anymore." The center represented more than just expanded services. It embodied the community's commitment to veteran support that extended far beyond symbolic gestures. Every aspect of the facility had been designed with input from local veterans, ensuring that programs would address real needs rather than perceived requirements. Angela Marconi approached Marcus with a clipboard full of volunteer schedules for the center's grand opening ceremony planned for the following week. Her transformation from reluctant observer to active advocate had been as remarkable as her husband's journey from discrimination to inclusion champion. "We've got confirmation from 37 businesses that will participate in the job fair," she reported. Vincent is coordinating the catering with 3 other veteran-friendly restaurants. The goal is to demonstrate that this isn't just Bella Vista's initiative anymore, it's community-wide. Marcus reviewed the volunteer list, noting names he recognized from the monthly gatherings that had grown from Bella Vista's Veterans Appreciation Thursday into a rotating community event hosted by different businesses throughout Ocean View. The sustainability of engagement had been crucial to transforming initial enthusiasm into lasting institutional change. "How's the family housing project progressing?" Marcus asked Dr. Mitchell, who'd also become involved in addressing the shortage of affordable housing for military families transitioning to civilian life. "Construction starts next month. 24 units specifically designed for families with disabled veterans. The adaptive features will accommodate wheelchairs, prosthetics, and other mobility devices. Plus, it's within walking distance of the resource center, the VA clinic, and most of the veteran-friendly businesses." The housing project had emerged from discussions during the city council meetings, when community members realized that veteran inclusion required more than business certification. It demanded comprehensive support systems that addressed employment, healthcare, housing, and social integration simultaneously. Rebecca Norton arrived with her camera crew to document the resource center's preparation for opening. Her coverage of the original incident had evolved into an ongoing series about community development and veteran integration that had attracted attention from urban planning professionals and military transition specialists nationwide. "Marcus, when this all started, did you envision it growing into something this comprehensive?" Marcus paused his review of program schedules to consider the question. "Honestly, I just wanted to be treated with basic respect when I went out for dinner. I never imagined that one incident could catalyze this level of community transformation. What do you think made the difference? Why did Ocean View embrace change instead of resisting it?" "Leadership," Marcus replied without hesitation. "Vincent could have responded to our confrontation with anger and legal threats. Instead, he chose education and growth. That set the tone for everything that followed." Vincent emerged from the center's administrative offices carrying boxes of materials for the Veterans Services Information Desk. His involvement in every aspect of the center's development had been total, driven by what appeared to be genuine commitment to veteran support rather than public relations management. "Marcus, the mentorship program coordinator, wants to discuss the peer support protocols." "With you," Vincent said, setting down the boxes. "We've got 15 veterans signed up to provide guidance for new arrivals, but she wants to ensure we're matching personalities and experiences appropriately." The mentorship program represented one of the most innovative aspects of Ocean View's veteran support system. Rather than relying solely on professional counselors, the community had developed a network of veteran volunteers who provided practical guidance about everything from job searching to navigating VA bureaucracy to finding appropriate housing. Harold. Brennan entered the center moving slowly but deliberately, his 83-year-old frame still maintaining military bearing despite the assistance of a walking cane. His role as the community's veteran elder statesman had become formalized through his appointment to the Resource Center's advisory board. "Son," he addressed Marcus, "I wanted to discuss the memorial wall installation. We've received photographs and service records from 47 local families who want to honor deceased veterans. The display will cover the entire west wall." The memorial component had been Harold's suggestion, recognizing that veteran support extended beyond active service members to include honoring those who'd made the ultimate sacrifice. The wall would feature not just names and dates, but stories of service and sacrifice that would educate community members about the true cost of military operations. Grace Chen approached their group, carrying enrollment forms for the center's various programs. We've got waiting lists for most services before we've even officially opened. The demand has exceeded our most optimistic projections. What's driving the interest? Dr. Mitchell asked. Word of mouth through military networks. Veterans from throughout the region are hearing about Ocean View's support systems and relocating here. We're seeing an influx of military families who specifically chose this community because of its veteran-friendly reputation. This development had created both opportunities and challenges for the community. Increased veteran population meant more demand for services, but also more resources and expertise available to support those services. Local businesses were adapting their hiring practices to take advantage of military skills and experience. Tommy Crawford entered the center wearing civilian clothes, but carrying himself with the unmistakable bearing that identified him to other veterans. He'd completed his military service and chosen to settle in Ocean View, drawn by the community's embrace of veteran families and the professional opportunities available through the resource center. Ghost, Tank, Harold acknowledged them both, with military formality that transcended generational differences. Good to see the team staying together in civilian life. The brotherhood doesn't end with discharge, Tommy replied, echoing words that had become something of a motto for Ocean View's veteran community. Plus, this place has become a model for what military transition can look like when communities get it right. Marcus and Tommy had maintained their friendship through the transition to civilian life, but their relationship had evolved beyond military brotherhood to include shared commitment to community service and veteran advocacy. Both had found meaningful careers in Ocean View. Marcus as Veteran Services Coordinator and Tommy as a counselor specializing in military transition issues. The psychological impact of community acceptance can't be overstated, Dr. Sarah Whitman observed as she joined their group. She'd relocated her practice to Ocean View to take advantage of the comprehensive veteran support system that had developed. When veterans feel welcomed and valued, it directly impacts their mental health and successful integration. Jennifer Palmer, the real estate agent who'd witnessed the original confrontation at Bella Vista, approached with information about property values and demographic changes. The veteran population increase has stabilized the housing market and attracted young families who value the community's emphasis on service and civic engagement. Property values have increased 12% over the past year. The economic impact of veteran inclusion had surprised even the initiative's strongest supporters. Rather than being a drain on community resources, veteran families had brought skills, experience, and economic activity that strengthened multiple sectors of the local economy. Maria Henderson, who'd left her job at Bella Vista to become the Resource Center's intake coordinator, reviewed the appointment schedule for the center's opening week. We've got veterans scheduled for services from as far away as San Luis Obispo and Riverside. Some are relocating specifically to access our programs. That creates an interesting challenge, Vincent observed. Success has made us a destination for veterans throughout Southern California. We need to ensure we can meet the demand without compromising service quality. Marcus nodded agreement. Growth management is crucial. We've built something valuable, but it needs to remain sustainable and replicable rather than becoming a unique resource that can't be duplicated elsewhere. The conversation reflected the complexity of successful community development initiatives. Ocean View's veteran support system had become a victim of its own success, attracting more demand than originally anticipated while serving as a model that other communities were attempting to replicate. Cole Mitchell, Coleman's younger brother, who'd recently completed his own military service, entered the center looking for information about job training programs. His arrival represented the ongoing nature of veteran transition, new service members constantly completing their military careers and seeking support for civilian integration. "Marcus, I heard about this place through military networks. My brother, Jake, said you folks had figured out how to make veteran transition actually work. We've figured out some pieces of it," Marcus replied modestly. "But every veteran situation is different. The key is having multiple options and flexible support systems." The Resource Center represented the culmination of lessons learned through a year of trial and error, success and adjustment. Programs had been modified based on participant feedback. Partnerships had been strengthened through demonstrated results, and community support had been sustained through visible positive outcomes. The grand opening ceremony of the Ocean View Veterans Resource Center drew attendees from across California, including representatives from the Department of Veterans Affairs, members of Congress, and military officials who'd come to study a community model that was being replicated throughout the nation. The morning sun illuminated a crowd of nearly 500 people gathered on Pacific Coast Highway, representing the largest community event in Ocean View's history. Marcus Bradley stood at the podium, overlooking the assembled crowd, his role as the ceremony's keynote speaker reflecting his transformation from isolated veteran to recognized community leader. The irony wasn't lost on him. 18 months earlier, he'd been asked to leave a restaurant because his presence was deemed unwelcome. Now, he was addressing a gathering that celebrated veteran inclusion and community support. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, fellow veterans and neighbors," Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly across the crowd. "We gather today not to celebrate a building, but to celebrate an idea. The idea that communities are strongest when they welcome and support all their members, especially those who've served in defense of our shared values." In the front row, Vincent and Angela Marconi sat with their teenage daughter, who'd volunteered to help coordinate the ceremony as part of her high school community service project. The family's involvement in veteran support had become a defining characteristic of their personal and professional lives. 18 months ago, I experienced discrimination in this community, Marcus continued. I could have left Ocean View, could have accepted that some places simply aren't welcoming to veterans with disabilities. Instead, through the support of my military brothers and the willingness of community leaders to learn and grow, that moment of discrimination became the catalyst for transformation. Congressman Robert Hayes, who'd driven down from Los Angeles specifically for the ceremony, listened with the attention of someone evaluating a program for potential federal support. The success of Ocean View's veteran integration model had attracted attention from policymakers seeking scalable solutions to nationwide veteran transition challenges. Colonel William Cross stood with a delegation of military officials who'd come to observe civilian-military cooperation that exceeded anything they'd encountered in their professional experience. The comprehensive nature of Ocean View's support system had become a case study in effective community partnership with military institutions. The Veterans Resource Center behind me represents more than expanded services, Marcus continued. It represents a community's commitment to the principle that service deserves recognition, that sacrifice merits support, and that every veteran deserves the opportunity to build a meaningful civilian life. Dr. Sarah Whitman approached the podium for her portion of the ceremony, carrying research data that documented the measurable improvements in veteran mental health outcomes since the initiative's implementation. Her findings had been published in professional journals and cited by other communities developing their own veteran support programs. The psychological benefits of community acceptance extend far beyond individual veterans, she explained to the audience. When veterans feel welcomed and valued, it creates positive cycles that strengthen families, neighborhoods, and entire communities. Children of veterans perform better in school when their parents feel integrated into community life. Veteran spouses report higher satisfaction with their quality of life. The benefits ripple outward in ways we're still discovering. Harold Brennan, now 84 but still maintaining his role as the community's veteran elder statesman, approached the podium with assistance from his grandson, the young man who'd received military guidance from Marcus during that first Veterans Appreciation Thursday at Bella Vista. The generational connection symbolized the lasting impact of community support systems. In my 84 years, I've witnessed this community grow and change in many ways, Harold said, his voice still strong despite his advanced age. But I've never seen anything as meaningful as what's happened here in the past 18 months. Young people are learning about service and sacrifice. Veterans are finding purpose and community. Civilians are discovering the strength that comes from supporting those who've served. The ceremony included recognition for individuals and organizations that had contributed to the initiative's success. Vincent received a Community Service Award for his transformation from discrimination to advocacy, while Bella Vista Restaurant was recognized as the first certified veteran-friendly business and the model for the broader certification program. "I want to be clear about something," Vincent said when called to the podium. "What happened at my restaurant 18 months ago was wrong. I was wrong. I discriminated against a veteran because of my ignorance and prejudice. The fact that something positive eventually emerged from that incident doesn't excuse my original behavior. It demonstrates the grace and character of people like Marcus Bradley, who chose education over revenge." His words carried the weight of genuine remorse and hard-won understanding. The transformation hadn't been easy or immediate, but it had been thorough and lasting. Tommy Crawford, now serving as a counselor at the Resource Center, addressed the crowd about the broader implications of community veteran support. What Ocean View has accomplished here demonstrates that veteran transition doesn't have to be a struggle between military and civilian cultures. When communities actively support integration, veterans bring skills, experience, and perspectives that strengthen everyone. The ceremony included a memorial dedication for the 47 local veterans honored on the center's memorial wall. Family members read names and brief service summaries, creating a solemn reminder of the ultimate sacrifice that gave meaning to the community's support efforts for living veterans. Grace Chen presented statistics about the center's anticipated impact: job training for 200 veterans annually, mental health services for 150 families, housing assistance for 75 households, and educational support for 100 veterans pursuing civilian careers or continued education. These numbers represent individual lives, she emphasized. Each veteran who finds employment, each family that receives counseling, each student who completes job training, these are our neighbors, our community members who deserve our support and recognition. Rebecca Norton concluded her 18-month documentation of the story with a live broadcast from the ceremony. What began as a simple act of discrimination has evolved into a model for community development that's being studied and replicated nationwide. Ocean View has demonstrated that meaningful change is possible when people choose growth over defensiveness and inclusion over exclusion. The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a bronze plaque at the center's entrance, bearing an inscription that captured the community's commitment. Dedicated to all who serve, honoring their sacrifice, supporting their transition, and celebrating their contribution to our community from the citizens of Ocean View with gratitude and respect. As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus found himself surrounded by veterans from throughout the region who'd come to learn about replicating Ocean View's model in their own communities. The conversations were practical and detailed: how to engage, resistant business owners, how to fund comprehensive programs, how to maintain community support over time. The key is starting with one success story. Marcus explained to a group of veterans from Orange County. Find one business owner willing to learn and change, demonstrate positive results, then use that example to engage others. Sustainable. Change happens incrementally, building on demonstrated success rather than demanding immediate transformation. Colonel Cross approached as the crowd thinned, carrying official documents that formalize the military's recognition of ocean views. Veteran support programs. Mr. Bradley, the Department of Defense is recommending Ocean View as a preferred community for veteran transition services. Military families completing their service will be specifically informed about the resources available here. The official. Recognition represented validation of the community's efforts while creating new challenges about managing increased demand for services. Success had made Ocean View a destination for military families throughout the Southwest, requiring careful planning to maintain service quality while meeting growing needs. Vincent approached Marcus for a private conversation as the ceremony concluded. Marcus, I've been thinking about expansion. There are communities throughout California asking for help developing their own veteran support programs. I'm wondering if we should consider creating a consulting service to help other places replicate what we've built here. Marcus considered the proposal thoughtfully. That's an interesting idea, but we need to ensure we maintain what we've built here while helping others. The community that gave us this opportunity has to remain our first priority. Absolutely. But imagine if every community in California had programs like these. Imagine if discrimination against veterans became unthinkable, because every business owner understood the value of military service and the obligation to support those who've served. The vision was compelling but complex. Sustainable social change required balancing expansion with consolidation, growth with stability, ambition with practical limitations. The success in Ocean View had created opportunities and responsibilities that extended far beyond the original goal of addressing a single incident of discrimination. As the afternoon sun set over the Pacific, Marcus walked through the Veterans Resource Center one final time before the official opening the following week. The facility represented 18 months of community effort, thousands of volunteer hours, and the transformation of an entire community's approach to veteran support. But more than that, it represented proof that individuals could create meaningful change when they chose to confront injustice rather than accept it, when they demanded better from their communities rather than simply moving elsewhere, and when they viewed setbacks as opportunities for education and growth rather than reasons for resignation. The story that had begun with discrimination at a restaurant had evolved into a model for community development that would influence veteran support programs nationwide. It was a legacy built on the simple principle that everyone deserves respect, that service merits recognition, and that communities are strongest when they support all their members. Brotherhood, as it turned out, wasn't limited to military service. It extended to any group of people committed to standing up for each other and building something better together than any of them could achieve alone. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch, and don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.